Aisha and Kelechi once had the kind of love people envied. They laughed over breakfast, took long drives through the busy streets of Lagos, and stayed up late dreaming about their future. But slowly, things changed. Kelechi started coming home late, his phone always buzzing with messages he wouldn't explain. Some nights, Aisha caught the scent of another woman's perfume on his shirts. The man who used to hold her close now barely looked at her. Desperate to save what was left of their marriage, Aisha did something she never thought she would: she lied. She told Kelechi she was pregnant, hoping it would bring him back to her. To her surprise, it worked at first. He smiled again, called her "my love" like he used to, and stayed home more often. He even placed his hands on her belly one night and whispered, "We're starting over." For a moment, Aisha let herself believe it was true, that the love they lost had returned. But deep inside, she felt the lie tightening around her chest. Every time he looked at her, she wondered if he could see through her. Every time he smiled, she felt guilt twisting in her stomach. The happiness she wanted so badly felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Aisha knew she had built this peace on a lie, and sooner or later, it would break. But for now, she kept pretending, because pretending felt easier than losing him completely. Weeks went by, and at first, Aisha thought things were finally getting better. Kelechi was home more often, and he even cooked for her a few times. But soon, something about his behavior began to change. He was no longer happy or excited about the baby. Instead, he seemed tense, distracted, almost scared. When she talked about going for a doctor's visit or mentioned feeling the baby move, he would quickly change the topic or find an excuse to leave. "Work is calling," he would say, or "let's talk later." He never touched her belly anymore. Sometimes, he looked at her like she was a stranger. Aisha started noticing other things too. He had started locking his phone, something he never did before. He would step outside to take calls and lower his voice so she couldn't hear. Once, she saw him typing quickly and deleting messages before she could come close. At night, when he thought she was asleep, he would sit on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone with a worried face. The man who once made her feel safe now made her feel uneasy. One evening, as they sat together in silence, she looked up and caught him staring at her. But it wasn't a look of love. His eyes were filled with guilt, like someone hiding a heavy secret. Their silence that night felt louder than any argument. Aisha felt a cold chill in her chest. For the first time, she wondered if maybe he knew she was lying. Maybe he had found out about her fake pregnancy. But as days passed, she realized something else. His fear wasn't about her lie. It was about his own. The more she watched him, the clearer it became, he was hiding something. His forced smiles, his sudden kindness, his nervous energy, it wasn't love trying to return. It was guilt trying to hide. Aisha tried to tell herself that maybe he was just stressed from work, but deep down she knew better. The man she married had always been open and confident. Now, he jumped whenever his phone rang and avoided her eyes like a guilty child. One night, she couldn't take it anymore. She reached out and touched his hand, asking softly, "Kelechi, are you okay?" He froze for a moment, then smiled in that fake, uneasy way. "Of course," he said, pulling his hand away. "I'm just tired." But the look in his eyes told her everything. He wasn't tired. He was terrified. That night, as he slept beside her, Aisha lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. What was he hiding? Why did he look at her like that? And why did it feel like the truth, whatever it was, would destroy everything? Her lie had kept him close, but now it felt like they were both living in a house made of secrets. And Aisha could sense it, one small crack, and everything would fall apart. The evening started beautifully. The hall was full of laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft sound of music. Aisha looked stunning in her gold dress as she greeted guests at the charity event. Everyone called her Madame Kelechi, smiling and admiring her grace. She wore her fake happiness like a crown, pretending everything in her life was perfect. But deep inside, she felt that something was wrong with Kelechi, something she couldn't quite name. As the event went on, Aisha stepped aside to take a break. She found a quiet spot near the back of the hall, close to where two women were chatting. They were well dressed, gossiping in hushed but excited tones. Aisha wasn't paying attention at first, until she heard her husband's name. The girl Kelechi put in that Victoria Island apartment, one of them whispered with a laugh. She's pregnant too, but that one's real. For a moment, Aisha couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone around her could hear it. She turned slightly, pretending to check her phone, but her ears caught every word. The women went on, laughing softly. He's been spoiling her, one said. That girl's lucky. Imagine, her baby will have Kelechi's name. Aisha's hand trembled. Her fake pregnancy, the lie she told to save her marriage, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. The man she was trying so hard to win back had already moved on, and even created a new life with someone else. The pain hit her like a wave, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she forced a small smile, lifted her glass, and quietly walked away. She went to the bathroom, locked the door, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection stared back, perfect makeup, calm expression, but eyes full of fire. She felt anger boiling inside her, not the kind that made her cry, but the kind that made her think clearly. She realized she wasn't the only one living a lie. Kelechi had his own lies too, only his had crossed a line she could never forgive. As she stood there, she thought about all the nights she'd spent pretending to be happy, pretending to be pregnant, pretending her marriage was still alive. She almost laughed. You wanted to save him, she whispered to herself, but he was never yours to save. When she stepped out of the bathroom, her face was calm again. No tears. No signs of pain. She rejoined the event, smiled at people, shook hands, and even laughed when someone made a joke. But inside, she was no longer the same woman. Something in her had shifted. Aisha decided that night she would no longer beg for love or chase loyalty. She would get even, not with noise or drama, but with silence and planning. The revenge forming in her mind wasn't wild or emotional. It was quiet, sharp, and patient. As she left the event, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, she whispered to herself, "You broke me, Kelechi. But you just taught me how to win." For weeks after the charity night, Aisha kept playing the part of the perfect wife. She laughed at his jokes, asked about his day, and let him believe the pregnancy had fixed everything. Inside, she watched him like a quiet storm, noting every small change, the hurried calls, the careful silences, the way he checked his watch as if the world outside their home mattered more than she did. She told herself to be patient, to let the lie do its work, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. Then the date came up on the calendar, the day she guessed the baby would arrive if her fake story had been true, and Kelechi announced a sudden business trip. It felt like the old, familiar hurt had found a new shape. Instead of waiting, Aisha booked a ticket and followed him, telling herself it was a test she had to pass. She landed in Abuja with a small bag and a steady heart. She tracked him to a private hospital using bits and pieces she had collected from his life, a taxi receipt he left on the table, a whispered address from a drunken friend, a bank text he had thought she did not see. Standing in the hospital corridor, she watched him through glass like someone reading a page that will change the story forever. He was there, not as the man who kissed her in the kitchen, but as a stranger holding another woman's hand, his face soft and proud. He leaned close and said words that cut deeper than any blade, "You have given me what Aisha could not." The sound of his voice was ordinary and terrible at the same time. In that moment, the fragile peace her lie had bought disappeared like fog in sunlight. The shock did not make her scream. It made her very quiet. A strange calm settled in her bones. All the little lies he had wrapped himself in fell away. She saw clearly then that his life had room for two truths at once, the one she performed and the one he had built somewhere else. The weight of betrayal did not break her. Instead it shifted into something colder and clearer. Every memory of their early love, every night she had stayed up waiting for him, transformed into evidence she could use. She stopped imagining reconciliation and started outlining the end she would write herself. No dramatic confrontations, no scenes in the street. She would not beg or plead. She would be deliberate and exact. Walking back into the city, she felt a new plan forming, step by careful step. Her heart had hardened from pain into purpose. If their marriage had been held together by secrets and false promises, then she would take those same tools and unmake it. She would expose the truth in a way that left no room for shame to hide. In the days that followed, she moved with a quiet, efficient rage, gathering facts, saving documents, and building a life that did not depend on him. The man who thought he had replaced her did not know he had only started the fire that would burn his whole house down. Aisha arrived home before Kelechi, her heart calm but her mind sharp as glass. She knew exactly what she had to do. The drive from the airport had been silent, but her thoughts were loud, every lie he'd told, every time he had looked her in the eye and pretended. This time, she wouldn't cry. She wouldn't scream. She would end it her way. The house was quiet when she entered. The same walls that once held laughter now felt like strangers watching her. She went straight to his study and began her work. She opened his drawers, checked the files, and went through the folders on his laptop. Everything was there, bank transfers to an unknown name, rent receipts for the Victoria Island apartment, pictures, and messages he thought he had deleted. She printed every single one. She even found copies of the ultrasound his mistress had proudly sent him. The sight of it hurt, but instead of breaking her, it gave her strength. It reminded her that the man she once loved was gone, replaced by someone she could no longer recognize. By evening, she had gathered everything, neatly printed documents, screenshots, and photos. She placed them all on the dining table, each item arranged with precision. In the middle, she set the fake positive pregnancy test she had used to fool him months ago. The house looked peaceful, but it was the calm before a storm. She lit a candle, poured herself a glass of wine, and waited. When Kelechi finally walked in, he looked surprised to see her sitting there. "You're back early," he said, forcing a smile. She didn't answer. She only looked at him, her face unreadable. His eyes fell on the table, and the color drained from his face. His steps slowed as he took in the papers, the photos, the evidence of his lies staring back at him. Aisha stood up slowly and said in a steady voice, "You can stop pretending now, I was never pregnant." "But she is." For a long moment, the room was silent. Kelechi's mouth opened, but no words came out. His body stiffened, his eyes darted from her to the documents, then back again. The man who once controlled every room he walked into suddenly looked small, cornered, exposed. He reached out as if to explain, but Aisha only shook her head. "You built this life," she said softly. "Now you can live with it." She walked past him without another glance, went upstairs, and packed her bags. Every movement was calm, deliberate, final. When she came back down, she took off her wedding ring and placed it on the table beside the fake test. "Keep your proof," she said. Then she walked out the door, her steps light, her heart heavy but free. Behind her, Kelechi stood frozen in the ruins of his own lies. The man who thought he had control over everything had finally lost the one person who saw through it all. After Aisha left, Kelechi's pride took the first hit. For a man who had built his entire life around control, losing her so suddenly felt like a public humiliation. He couldn't accept that she had walked away quietly, without begging, without tears. So he did what weak men often do, he tried to destroy her. Within days, the whispers began. He told friends, business partners, and even family that Aisha had lost her mind, that she had imagined everything, that her pregnancy was a delusion born from jealousy. He made himself look like the victim, the poor husband who had done his best to love a troubled woman. He shut down her access to their joint bank accounts, cancelled her cards, and told mutual friends not to work with her. He wanted her desperate, humiliated, crawling back. But Aisha had already prepared for this. Long before she exposed him, she had been quietly building something of her own. Using her savings and the small consulting job she took on while pretending to be the dutiful wife, she had opened her own firm. She worked late into the night, learning, networking, building connections under a different name. So when Kelechi thought he was cutting her off, she was already standing on solid ground. Her company began small, but her focus was sharp. She worked with discipline and grace, and soon, her reputation grew. One of her first major clients turned out to be a powerful politician who happened to be one of Kelechi's biggest rivals. The irony wasn't lost on her, it was poetic justice. The same world Kelechi tried to shut her out of became the place where she gained influence and strength. When the rumors about her madness spread, Aisha didn't respond. She let the lies flow, because she knew that success was the loudest form of revenge. Every time someone doubted her, she let her work speak instead. Her firm started landing major contracts, appearing in business headlines, and drawing attention from people who used to only know her as Kelechi's wife. Now, she was Aisha Adeyemi, the strategist everyone wanted to work with. Kelechi watched it all happen, and for the first time, he couldn't stop it. The same people who once called to congratulate him on business deals were now praising her. His attempts to ruin her only made her story more powerful. People admired how she carried herself with calm dignity, never addressing the scandal, never mentioning his name. Behind his back, investors started pulling away, not wanting to be associated with his messy downfall. His empire began to shake, little by little. And through it all, Aisha never gloated, never looked back. She let him fight shadows while she stood in the light. The man who once believed he owned her reputation, her finances, her peace, now had none of his own. Aisha didn't destroy him with anger. She simply lived better. And that, in the end, was the revenge he never saw coming. Months passed, and life changed faster than anyone expected. Aisha's firm was thriving, her name appearing in magazines and business panels. She had become the face of resilience, quiet, graceful, and unshakable. People who once only knew her as Kelechi's wife now introduced her as Aisha, the founder. Every success she earned felt like another layer of peace. She didn't look back, not even once. But life has a way of writing its own endings, and Kelechi's was about to arrive in the cruelest way possible. One morning, the news hit social media like wildfire. Business mogul Kelechi Adeyemi caught in paternity scandal. The headlines spread everywhere, blogs, newspapers, even gossip shows. The woman he had chosen over Aisha, the one he had proudly called the mother of his child, had demanded more money. When he refused, she tried to threaten him with exposure. Kelechi, desperate to protect his image, ordered a DNA test to prove the child was his. But the results shattered him, the baby wasn't his. The woman had scammed him, pretending the child was his to secure luxury, power, and attention. The news spread fast. Investors began pulling out of his company, scared of being linked to the scandal. Partners who once praised him stopped answering his calls. His public image, once spotless, fell apart overnight. His family turned cold, embarrassed by the disgrace. The same man who had tried to bury Aisha's name was now drowning under his own. His empire, built on pride and lies, began to crumble piece by piece. While he hid from the world, Aisha kept rising. Her consulting firm opened offices in 3 more cities. Her story of strength inspired women everywhere. She became a symbol of power and self-worth, the woman who turned betrayal into success. When she was invited to speak at a women's empowerment summit in Lagos, she accepted with quiet gratitude. The hall was packed that day. Cameras flashed, applause filled the room, and Aisha stood on stage, glowing in a simple white dress. She spoke about rebuilding after heartbreak, about finding strength when life breaks you in half. Her words were soft but carried the weight of everything she had lived through. As she scanned the crowd, her eyes stopped for a moment. There he was. Kelechi. He sat at the back of the room, unshaven, tired, and smaller than she remembered. He didn't look like the man who once owned every room. He looked like someone who had lost everything that mattered. Their eyes met for a brief second. Aisha didn't smile or frown. She simply kept speaking, her voice steady and full of life. By the time she finished, the hall erupted in applause. Kelechi quietly slipped out, unable to face her strength. Aisha didn't chase him. She didn't need to. His downfall was not her doing, it was the truth catching up to him. And as she walked off the stage, surrounded by admiration, she realized she hadn't just survived his betrayal. She had turned it into her victory. The applause in the hall still echoed as Aisha took a slow breath and looked at the crowd. Cameras flashed, people stood, and some even wiped their eyes. Her story had touched something deep in everyone who heard it. She smiled softly and ended her speech with the words that had lived in her heart for years. "I once lied to keep love," she said. "But I learned that truth, even when it hurts, sets you free." The room fell silent for a few seconds before erupting in applause. The sound filled the hall like thunder, but Aisha's mind was calm. She had finally said the words she needed to say, not to the world, but to herself. At the back of the room, Kelechi sat for a moment, his hands trembling. He couldn't look at her. The woman he had once broken was now standing in her power, shining in front of everyone. When the applause grew louder, he quietly slipped out through the side door, his face pale with regret. Aisha didn't notice him leave. She was too busy greeting women who came to hug her, thanking her for giving them courage. That night, Aisha went home to her daughter, the little girl she had adopted after rebuilding her life. The child ran into her arms, laughing, full of warmth. As Aisha tucked her in, she brushed her tiny curls and whispered, "We don't fake love here. We create it." Her daughter smiled sleepily, holding her hand. Aisha stood by the window after turning off the lights, watching the city shimmer below. Once, she had lied to save a broken marriage. Now, she lived in truth, surrounded by peace. Her lie had once destroyed her, but it had also shaped her into a woman who finally understood that sometimes, losing everything is how you truly begin.